Tonight, let's step into a world that never had its great silence. 66 million years ago, in our timeline, life on Earth took a sudden, violent turn, and the age of dinosaurs ended. But in this quiet documentary for sleep, we'll imagine another path. One where the skies stayed full of thunder-winged shadows, where forests still trembled under the slow footsteps of giants, and where the world kept evolving under reptilian reign. We won't rush. We'll drift, continent by continent, coast by coast, watching how landscapes, oceans, and climates might change when the dominant creatures never disappear. We'll wonder what mammals become when they remain small and cautious for millions of years, and what intelligence might look like when it rises from a different branch of life. So settle in, breathe slowly, and as the night grows softer around you, let the ancient Earth return, alive, watchful, and endlessly transforming. Imagine for a moment that the most famous ending in Earth's history never truly arrives. The Great Impact still happens, or something like it does, but it lands on a world that refuses to fully collapse. In our timeline, the planet tips past a threshold. Darkness lingers too long, food webs snap, oceans turn hostile, and entire lineages vanish like candles pinched out by a single breath. But in this quieter, alternate Earth, the catastrophe is just not quite final. Maybe the incoming object is smaller, or it breaks apart in the atmosphere. Maybe it hits at a slightly different angle, or in a region that throws less sulfur into the stratosphere. Maybe volcanic activity, already simmering, releases gases in a slower rhythm, giving ecosystems just enough time to adjust instead of shattering all at once. The result is still frightening, still world-changing, but not a clean extinction event, more like a brutal era, a long winter that eventually ends. In the first hours after the strike, the horizon burns. Forests ignite in distant sheets. Shockwaves race through the ground. Tsunamis claw at coastlines, tearing mangroves from their roots and scattering reefs into broken limestone gardens. The sky fills with ash and soot. Daylight turns the color of bruised metal. If you were standing in a river valley then, you might see flakes drifting down like grey snow. Soft, quiet, wrong. For weeks and months, the world feels smaller. The sun is dimmed behind a veil. Temperatures fall. Seasons become confused. Plants struggle to photosynthesize. The green engine of the planet, which usually hums without us noticing, begins to cough. The first to suffer are the specialists, the creatures that need one particular kind of food, one particular kind of habitat, one particular stable pattern of seasons. The grandest herbivores, those that require endless fields of fresh growth, begin to thin. Their migrations stretch farther, their herds break into fragments, and what once sounded like the constant drumbeat of life becomes a quieter, more scattered rhythm. But not everything collapses everywhere. Not all forests burn. Not all coasts drown. Not all climates freeze at once. Some places become refuges, pockets of endurance where life holds on like a seed waiting for spring. Along certain shorelines, kelp forests persist in cold, nutrient-rich water, feeding fish, which feed larger hunters. In sheltered river deltas, hardy plants keep growing, slow and stubborn, fed by silt and fresh water. In tropical regions closer to the equator, the temperature drop is less deadly, and forests, though damaged, remain standing in patches, ragged, thinned, but alive. In these scattered sanctuaries, survival becomes a kind of quiet selection. The dinosaurs who endure are not simply the biggest or the fiercest. They are the ones with the right timing, the right traits, the right luck. And then, with each passing year, the right adaptability. A medium-sized predator that can eat almost anything, fish, carrion, small mammals, insects, has an advantage over a giant specialist hunter, built only for taking down massive prey. A herbivore that can browse on tough plants, strip bark, dig for roots, or graze on whatever stunted growth remains, lasts longer than one that depends on a single lush plant community. Creatures with insulated bodies, whether through primitive feathering, thicker skin, or more efficient internal heat, handle cold snaps better than those that rely purely on external warmth. And little by little, the world begins to rethread itself. The first recovery forests are not the same as the ones that came before. They are simpler, faster growing, opportunistic. Ferns spread quickly across ash-laden ground. Shrubs follow. Early flowering plants, already diversifying, seize the chance to colonize open spaces, blooming wherever sunlight breaks through the haze. Insects rebound in waves, drawn to the new growth. Small animals, mammals included, multiply in the shadows and undergrowth, living fast, reproducing quickly, taking whatever niches open up. Above it all, the surviving dinosaurs move through the changing world like living weather systems. Some herds become more nomadic than ever before. They travel with a new urgency, following bands of vegetation like travelers searching for lit windows in a dark city. Their routes become longer, more complex, learned not just by instinct, but by memory passed down through generations. The old pathways are no longer reliable. Rivers shift, forest edges retreat and return. Each year becomes a new map. Predators follow, but even hunting changes. The open plains are emptier. The great reliable prey is rarer, so hunters adapt their strategies. Some become more patient, more scavenger-like, reading the land for weakness and opportunity. Others become ambush specialists, using darkness, brush, and broken terrain, conserving energy and striking only when odds are good. There are years when the world feels haunted, when the sounds are fewer, when the morning chorus is thin, when even the wind seems to move through emptier spaces. But the important difference in this timeline is that the thread never fully snaps. Because somewhere, always somewhere, life keeps breathing. As decades pass, the skies clear. Not immediately, not smoothly. There are setbacks, mini ice years, sudden storms, droughts, floods. But the planet's systems, resilient and indifferent, begin to find balance again. Sunlight strengthens, plant life thickens, rivers return to predictable cycles. The oceans, after their own turmoil, stabilize enough to support the old richness of plankton and reef life. And the dinosaurs, smaller populations now, yes, but still present, expand again into the growing spaces. This second age is not identical to the first. It carries scars. It carries lessons written into DNA. Dinosaurs that once dominated through sheer bulk may evolve toward efficiency. Bodies that require less food for the same strength. Limbs better suited to long travel. Digestive systems tuned for tougher plants. Predators may evolve sharper senses and more flexible diets. Some may shift toward pack-like coordination. Not necessarily like wolves, but like intelligent opportunists that understand spacing, timing, and the advantage of working in loose cooperation. Even behavior changes under pressure. More attentive parenting could become common in certain lineages, guarding nests more fiercely, choosing safer nesting grounds, spreading eggs across multiple sites rather than risking everything in one clutch. Migration may become more deeply ingrained. Seasonal movement, once a strategy, becomes an identity. Over time, the world grows loud again, not with human noise, no engines, no power lines, no cities, but with the fullness of a planet that is occupied by enormous lives. You might stand on a hill at dusk and hear it. Distant calls rolling across a valley, the steady crunch of plants being torn from the earth, the low thud of feet through soft ground. The air itself carries presence. And then, as the new world settles into its long, patient rhythm, evolution begins its slow art again, shaping the survivors into forms that the first dinosaur age never had time to invent. Because once the crisis passes, once survival is no longer a daily emergency, life becomes creative. The new dinosaurs are not simply the old ones returning. They are altered branches, diverging and experimenting across millions of years. Some lineages, pressured by the colder, darker years, lean harder into warm-bloodedness and insulation. Feathers, already present in many theropods, become more widespread and more varied, not just for display, but for thermoregulation. In some regions, even large-bodied species develop dense coverings, turning what we might once have imagined as scaly giants into creatures that, at a distance, appear soft-edged, shaggy, almost mammal-like in silhouette, though their eyes and movement still carry that unmistakable dinosaur presence. In warmer regions, feathers may become lighter, more decorative, used to signal health, status, or readiness to mate. Colors intensify, patterns become complex. Crests and frills evolve not just as weapons or shields, but as living billboards, structures for display, for recognition, for intimidation that avoids the cost of fighting. And then there are the horns, the plates, the spikes, the architecture of defense and dominance that can take on endless forms when millions of years are available for experimentation. In one ecosystem, a herbivore might evolve a low armored profile to resist ambush attacks. In another, a tall crested head becomes a symbol of maturity, used in ritualized contests that rarely end in death. Nature, whenever it can, prefers rules to chaos, because rules reduce wasted energy. Predators evolve too, in ways that feel both familiar and strange. Some become more specialized for pursuit across open land, with long legs and efficient breathing, built for endurance rather than short bursts. Others move in the opposite direction, becoming compact, powerful ambushers that strike from cover and rely on explosive strength. In dense forests, quiet becomes an advantage. In open plains, speed and stamina rule. Along coasts, some predators adapt to fishing and scavenging, stalking tidal flats like silent ghosts. Senses sharpen across the board. Eyes become better at dawn and dusk, when heat is lower and shadows are long. Hearing becomes tuned to low-frequency vibrations, the kind produced by distant footsteps and deep calls. Smell, often underestimated in our traditional image of dinosaurs, may become a major tool, especially for hunters and scavengers navigating vast territories. And across the skies, the story becomes especially vivid. In our world, pterosaurs disappear at the end of the Cretaceous, and birds inherit the air. But in this timeline, the air remains contested. The skies are not an open throne, waiting for one lineage to sit on. They are a crowded ocean of wind and wings. Some pterosaurs survive the crisis in coastal refuges, feeding on fish and carrion, nesting on cliffs where fire cannot easily reach. Over time, they diversify again, small insect hunters flickering through forests, long-winged gliders crossing oceans, sturdy, heavy-bodied species prowling shorelines and river mouths. Their membranes evolve subtle variations, thicker in cold climates, lighter and broader in warm ones. Each shape a compromise between speed, lift, and endurance. Birds too, still dinosaurs, still a branch of that same ancient tree, continue evolving, but without the same vacant sky to dominate. They become one important presence among many. In some regions, birds might become more specialized for dense habitats, where pterosaurs struggle, or for rapid, agile flight through cluttered canopy. In others, they may compete directly, evolving larger sizes, stronger flight muscles, and more efficient migration patterns. The result is a sky filled with variety, flapping wings and membrane wings, feathered bodies and leathery silhouettes, calls that echo like music and cries that sound like ancient alarms. On the ground, ecosystems become layered with dinosaur life at every scale. There are tiny, quick omnivores that live like clever crows, curious, opportunistic, social, always watching. There are mid-sized herbivores that graze and browse in mixed groups, shaping vegetation through constant movement. There are massive, slow-moving giants in regions where productivity is high, river-fed plains, monsoon forests, fertile coastal basins, animals that function like moving continents, their presence changing the landscape simply by existing. And as these creatures spread into every biome, forests, wetlands, mountains, deserts, polar regions, the idea of a dinosaur changes. It stops being one image. It becomes a whole world of images, feathered, scaled, armored, sleek, hulking, delicate, brightly colored, earth-toned, nocturnal, diurnal, migratory, territorial. The planet itself is shaped differently because these animals never leave. Grasslands may expand more slowly or differently because massive herbivores continually reshape plant communities. Forest structure changes depending on which browsers dominate. Riverbanks are eroded and rebuilt under the pressure of repeated migration crossings. Trails become permanent features. Clearings form and refill. Seeds are carried far inside digestive tracts and deposited like gifts of future forests. Even the sound of Earth is different. Some dinosaurs likely develop deep, resonant calls used for long-distance communication, especially in open environments. Low-frequency sounds travel far, even through forests, even across water. Imagine, in the distance, a slow, rolling note, less like a roar, more like a resonant instrument, a living horn that makes the air vibrate gently. Not constant, not harsh. Just present enough to remind the world that something large is moving beyond the trees. Reproduction, too, becomes a field of endless variation. Nesting strategies diversify. Some species lay many eggs and rely on numbers. Others invest in fewer offspring with more protection. Some nest in colonies like seabirds, turning cliffs and islands into crowded nurseries. Some choose hidden forest sites, using camouflage and careful timing. In cold climates, certain lineages may evolve behaviors like brooding with insulated feathers, or communal nesting that shares warmth and defense. Parental care, already present in many dinosaur groups, could become even more sophisticated when survival favors attentiveness and learning. And then, gradually, almost imperceptibly, new kinds of dinosaur intelligence begin to appear, not as a sudden leap, but as a slow deepening. Curiosity becomes advantageous. Social learning spreads. Problem-solving helps an animal survive seasonal scarcity. A creature that remembers whether water remains during drought, or which plants stay edible after frost, or how to steal food without injury, is a creature that leaves more descendants. Over millions of years, some lineages may become almost crafty, not human, not destined for cities, but attentive in a way that feels startling when you meet it. An animal that studies you back, that pauses and evaluates, that communicates with its group using posture, sound, and timing, that can recognize individuals, that can learn. And yet, despite all this dynamism, the world never becomes a simple story of dinosaurs winning forever, because evolution never stops. It doesn't crown one ruler and walk away. Mammals still exist, still diversify, still innovate, just under different pressures, in different places, at different speeds. Plants keep evolving defenses, poisons, spines, and partnerships. Insects adapt in dazzling ways. The climate shifts, continents drift, oceans rise and fall. What makes this timeline feel so rich, so alive, is that the greatest disruption in our history becomes instead a narrowing, and then an opening, a world bruised but not erased, a world that keeps its ancient heart beating. And if you could stand in this alternate present, on a quiet night with no human lights, you might look out across a valley and see movement that feels like a dream from the deep past. A distant line of silhouettes crossing mist, steady and calm. Not rushing, not frightened. Simply moving as they have always moved, through an earth that never forgot them. In a world where dinosaurs never leave the throne, mammals grow up with a different kind of destiny. Not an empty planet waiting to be inherited, but a crowded, watchful earth where danger is large, fast, and often silent. The great canopy has eyes. The grasslands have shadows. The shorelines have wings overhead. And in that constant pressure, mammal life doesn't vanish. It specializes. It becomes subtle. Picture the earliest mammals after the near catastrophe, when ecosystems are rebuilding and the survivors are spreading again. Mammals are still there, living in crevices and under roots, slipping through the undergrowth like quick thoughts. Many are nocturnal, not because they love the dark, but because the dark gives them something precious. A slight reduction in attention from the giants. A few hours when the air is cooler, the largest hunters are less active and movement can be quieter. Over millions of years, this pressure becomes a sculptor. Mammals develop bodies designed for escape. Flexible spines, springy limbs, compact frames that can twist through holes and burrows. Their skeletons are not built for wrestling with giants, but for vanishing from them. Their senses become fine-tuned instruments. Hearing sharpens for the faintest tremor, the slight crunch of leaf litter from something heavier approaching. Smell becomes a detailed map, telling them which path is safe, which patch of soil hides a predator, which tree was marked only hours ago by something territorial. Eyes adapt for low light, gathering moon and starlight into usable information. The world teaches them, again and again, that survival belongs to the ones who notice first. In our timeline, mammals explode into open daylight after the dinosaurs disappear. They expand into every niche: grazers, apex predators, ocean giants, flying specialists. But here, expansion is always negotiated with teeth and talons already in place. Any mammal that tries to grow too large in a region dominated by big theropods and armored herbivores faces a brutal equation. Bigger bodies need more food, more open movement, more exposure. And exposure is expensive. So in many places, mammals remain small by necessity, but not simple. They become the planet's experts in the hidden half of the world. They learn to live underground, and not just in shallow burrows. Imagine entire networks beneath the roots, tunnels that twist like veins, chambers lined with dried leaves, storerooms packed with seeds and tubers. Some mammals become true engineers of soil, constantly moving earth, aerating it, shaping drainage, helping plants in ways they never intended. Their tunnels become microclimates, protected from both heat and cold. In storm seasons, they become shelters. In drought, they become the last moist places where life can breathe. Other mammals become masters of the trees. But the trees in this world are not safe, not even high above the ground. Feathered dinosaurs hunt in the branches. Small climbing predators leap between trunks. Some gliding reptiles or bird-like hunters patrol the canopy in swift arcs. So arboreal mammals evolve to be even more cautious, more quiet, and more precise. Their hands become better at gripping bark without noise. Their feet become sensitive to vibration. Their bodies become lighter, their jumps cleaner, their roots more complex. They don't just move through the canopy, they memorize it. They know which branch holds weight, which vine is slick after rain, which tree is visited by predators at dusk. And some mammals go the opposite way, into water. In a dinosaur world, shorelines and rivers are busy places. Large reptiles and semi-aquatic predators may patrol shallow waters, and pterosaurs might scan for movement from above. But water also offers camouflage and escape routes that land cannot. So certain mammal lineages evolve toward amphibious lifestyles, swimming quietly, nesting in reed beds, diving beneath lily pads when danger passes overhead. Their fur becomes water resistant. Their whiskers grow sensitive. Their breath control improves. They become the quiet ghosts of wetlands. Across all these niches, mammals develop defenses not based on strength, but on deterrence. Some evolve armor, thickened skin, bony plates, dense spines. Not enough to fight a dinosaur, but enough to make the mouthful unpleasant, the struggle not worth it. Others evolve chemical defenses, bitter secretions, toxic saliva, foul scents that linger. A predator learns quickly that some small creatures are not worth the pain. Some evolve deception, patterns that mimic leaves, colors that blend with bark, fur that looks like fungus or dead plant matter. Stillness becomes a strategy as real as running. And perhaps the most important shift of all, mammals become intensely social in certain lineages, not because they want company, but because company means information. A group is many eyes, many ears, many chances to notice danger first. So you might find small mammals living in colonies beneath rocky outcrops, with sentinels that pause and listen while others feed. Warning calls become refined. One sound for aerial threats, another for ground predators, another for snakes or climbing hunters. Cooperation emerges in gentle forms, shared warmth at night, communal nesting, coordinated foraging routes that minimize exposure. Intelligence develops here too, but it is a kind of intelligence shaped by stealth and memory rather than conquest. It's not about taking over open land, it's about reading the world's subtle signals. A mammal that remembers the safe path to a hidden food source. A mammal that learns the timing of a predator's patrol. A mammal that recognizes the difference between a harmless shadow and a moving threat. A mammal that can adapt its behavior when conditions shift, when ash falls again from distant volcanoes, when drought pushes predators closer to water, when new dinosaur species migrate into the area. This is the intelligence of survival under pressure, quiet, quick, highly aware. And the result is a mammal world that is astonishingly diverse, even if it remains mostly unseen. In our timeline, we notice mammals because they become the largest, loudest, most dominant animals. But here, if you walked through a dinosaur forest at midday, you might see none at all. You might assume mammals are rare, and you would be wrong. They are everywhere, in burrows, in root hollows, under fallen logs, inside dense thickets, in cliff crevices, in the quiet layers of the world that giants cannot easily access. They are the small heartbeat beneath the giant heartbeat. And it is in those hidden layers that the story of primates, if it still happens, becomes a strange, uncertain thing. Because primates in our world are shaped by forests and by opportunity. In this world, forests are older, richer, and more dangerous. The canopy is not merely a place of fruit and sunlight, it is a hunting ground. A primate lineage could still emerge, evolving hands, vision, social bonds, and learning. But its path would likely be slower, more cautious, and perhaps more constrained. It might remain small and nocturnal. It might become an expert in concealed movement and quiet communication. It might live in dense tangles of vegetation where larger predators can't maneuver. Or it might never evolve past certain thresholds at all, held back not by lack of potential, but by constant ecological pressure that favors staying hidden over exploring the unknown. In this dinosaur world, mammals don't become kings. They become legends of the underworld, clever, persistent, and quietly shaping ecosystems from beneath the surface. Now, lift your imagination upward from the dark undergrowth to the towering green cathedrals that dominate much of this Earth, and you begin to see how different the planet itself feels when dinosaurs remain the architects of the land. Because forests are not just collections of trees, they are living structures shaped by the animals that move through them. In our world, forests are influenced by deer browsing, elephant clearings, and human management. In a dinosaur world, the scale of influence is different. The great herbivores are not occasional visitors. They are foundational forces. Their feeding patterns decide which trees thrive and which fail. Their migrations carve corridors through vegetation. Their bodies compress soil, open clearings, create mud wallows, change riverbanks, and scatter seeds across vast distances. The forest becomes, in a sense, a collaboration between plants and giants. Imagine standing at the edge of one of these forests at dawn. Mist hangs low, caught between trunks. Light filters through in pale beams. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and resin and crushed leaves. And somewhere deeper inside, you hear it. A slow, resonant sound, not quite a roar, more like a deep call that rolls through the trees. Then, the ground begins to tremble gently, as if the forest is breathing. A herd moves through, not rushing, not panicked. A line of immense herbivores, some towering with long necks sweeping above the undergrowth, others lower and more armored, moving like living fortresses. Their feet press into soft soil and leave shallow basins that fill with rainwater later, becoming tiny ponds for insects and frogs. Their tails brush saplings aside. Their mouths strip foliage, and the sound of feeding is like slow, tearing fabric. Where they pass, the forest changes. They open paths that smaller animals use for generations. They knock down dead trees that become homes for insects, fungi, and burrowing creatures. They break branches that let sunlight spill onto the forest floor, encouraging bursts of new growth. They transport seeds stuck to their skin or swallowed with fruit, and they deposit those seeds in rich dung that fertilizes the next generation of plants. In this world, the forest floor is a mosaic of disturbance and recovery, patches of deep shade, sudden bright clearings, fern thickets, flowering shrubs, young trees racing upward, and ancient trunks that have stood for centuries. And because dinosaurs remain diverse, the forest is not shaped by one kind of feeding. Some herbivores browse high, stripping leaves from branches and altering the canopy itself. Others graze low, keeping certain plants from dominating, creating open understories. Some use beaks to clip tough vegetation. Others use teeth to grind fibrous plants into usable energy. In response, plants evolve their own strategies. Some grow faster, investing in quick height to escape browsing. Others evolve toxins, bitter compounds, thick bark, thorny defenses, or leaves that are less nutritious. Some form partnerships with insects, offering nectar in exchange for protection. Others rely on seasonal timing, blooming or fruiting when herbivores are elsewhere. The forest becomes an evolutionary conversation, ongoing and endless. And in that conversation, predators are always present. They do not need to be seen to be real. A feathered hunter might sit motionless on a low branch, perfectly still, its body aligned with the trunk, its eyes half-lidded. It is not sleeping. It is listening. Below, small dinosaurs and mammals move through leaf litter, unaware. The hunter waits, not for hours, but for the exact moment when movement becomes predictable. Some predators specialize in the edges of herds, tracking the weak, the young, the isolated. Others patrol waterways, where animals must approach to drink. Some hunt by speed, charging through open clearings with sudden violence. Others hunt by stealth, using camouflage patterns and a low profile, blending into the forest's shadows. And because the forest is thick, sound becomes important. Calls echo through the trees, warning cries, contact calls between family members, mating calls that travel at dusk. Some herbivores might use deep, low-frequency sounds that move through trunks and soil, felt as much as heard. A distant call can signal danger or food or follow, or I am here. In the twilight hours, when the forest cools and the light becomes soft, the entire system shifts. Diurnal dinosaurs settle. Nocturnal life emerges. Insects begin their hum. Tiny mammals slip out from burrows and hollows. Smaller predators become active. Eyes shine briefly in the dark when they catch moonlight. The forest becomes a different world at night. Not quieter, but subtler. And above it all, in the canopy and in the open spaces between treetops, wings pass. Sometimes they are feathered wings, birds navigating a contested sky. Sometimes they are membranous wings, pterosaurs gliding between updrafts, scanning the world below. Their shadows slide over leaves like drifting clouds. Their calls, when they make them, are strange, thin, sharp, ancient. The result is a planet where forests feel like true kingdoms, not empty scenery, occupied, layered, watched. Even the river systems inside these forests are shaped by dinosaurs. Large animals trample banks, creating shallow crossings. Mud wallows form near water, attracting insects and amphibians, feeding birds and small hunters. The churned soil changes the flow of water, sometimes redirecting it, sometimes causing new ponds to form. In dry seasons, these places become critical refuges where many species gather, herbivores, predators, scavengers, all within the same trembling proximity. And in those moments, the forest reveals its deepest truth. It is not peaceful. It is balanced, a balance maintained by movement, hunger, growth, and time. Yet despite the tension, there is also an immense steadiness to this world. Dinosaurs have ruled for so long that ecosystems are built around their presence. There is an ancient confidence in how the forest functions. Even danger has routines. Even predators have patterns. Even migrations follow rhythms that older trees have witnessed many times. If you were lying on the forest floor in this world, safe, somehow safe, you would feel it. The slow pulse of life. The faint vibration of distant steps. The gentle rain of leaves shaken loose by something massive passing overhead. And you might understand, in a sleepy, drifting way, that the forest is not merely where dinosaurs live. The forest is what dinosaurs have made the world into. A living cathedral of growth and shadow, shaped by giants who never left, and filled, always filled, with the quiet, persistent lives that learned how to survive beneath their feet. Out at sea, far from any shoreline, the world feels older, wide, breathing, and endlessly patient. The surface is calm in long, slow swells, rising and falling like the chest of a sleeping animal. Sunlight pours down in soft, wavering bands, and beneath it, the ocean becomes a layered sky of its own, bright near the top, dimmer below, and then, eventually, deep blue silence. In this timeline, the seas never truly hand over their crown. The great marine lineages that once ruled ancient waters don't vanish into history. They endure through the hard years, then spread again, diversifying as the planet steadies. Their descendants may not look exactly like the forms we know from fossils. Millions of years would reshape them into new solutions. But the spirit remains. Large, air-breathing predators and travelers. built for a life of water and distance. Some are long-bodied and swift, moving with a sinuous, controlled power, like living spears slipping through the currents. Others are broader, with strong paddles that row them forward in steady strokes, their heads turning gently as if listening to the sea itself. Some have long necks adapted for surprising reaches, able to strike into schools of fish without moving their entire body. Others are heavy-jawed hunters that patrol like silent submarines, built not for elegance but for inevitability. They surface to breathe with a sound that's not quite a roar, more like a deep exhale, a brief release of air into open space before they slip back down. When they surface, the ocean remembers you're not alone out here, not even close. And around them, the sea is crowded with life. In warm shallows, reefs grow into intricate cities of stone and color. Coral polyps build their slow architecture, one tiny decision at a time, while fish weave through branches like bright thoughts. Small sharks cruise the edges. Rays drift over sand flats, lifting little puffs of silt. Shells open and close. Anemones sway. 1,000 small mouths graze and filter and bite, each one keeping the system moving, like gears in a gentle machine. But in this world, the reefs also live under a different kind of shadow. Above them, large winged reptiles, or large seabirds, depending on which lineage claims the sky in a given region, circle on thermals and scan the water with practiced precision. Their silhouettes glide across the surface, and when they dive, they do it with startling speed, folding into the air like a thrown knife. The splash is brief. Then they rise again, shaking off pearls of water that sparkle for an instant and vanish. Along the coast, beaches become both nursery and battleground. On moonlit nights, nesting season turns the shoreline into a quiet procession of ancient routines. Large reptiles haul themselves from the water with slow determination, bodies heavy with life to come. They choose places where the sand is warm and dry, where tides won't reach too high. They dig with careful movements, front limbs, back limbs, sometimes using the whole weight of their bodies to shape the pit. And then they lay their eggs, round and pale in the darkness, hidden like secrets beneath the world. In the days that follow, the shoreline changes. Scavengers begin to appear, small dinosaurs and mammals, quick and watchful, drawn by scent and opportunity. Some dig clumsily and retreat at the first sign of danger. Others wait for the exact moment when defenders are distracted, slipping in like thieves and disappearing again. Predatory dinosaurs may patrol the dunes, using the coast as a hunting corridor. And overhead, wings keep returning, always returning, because beaches are predictable places, predictable and therefore rich. Yet life still finds its way through. Not every nest is discovered. Not every clutch is lost. Some parents guard with remarkable persistence, remaining near their nesting sites and driving away intruders with displays, calls, and sudden aggressive bursts. Others rely on secrecy, choosing remote coves and sheltered islands where fewer hunters roam. And when hatching finally comes, the sand begins to move in tiny, trembling bursts, as if the beach itself is waking. A nest opens, and a dozen small lives spill into the world, blinkingly bright-eyed, awkward, determined. They don't understand the ocean yet. They only feel the pull of it. They scuttle and stumble toward the waterline, guided by instinct and moonlight and the sound of waves. Many won't make it, but those that do will carry the shoreline story back into the deep, and the deep has its own stories. Far below the reefs, where sunlight weakens, the sea becomes quieter and more strange. Here, the water is colder. Movement is slower. Food arrives not as endless abundance, but as occasional gifts. Dead fish drifting down, fragments of life sinking from above, brief swarms of creatures following seasonal pulses of plankton. In these dim layers, bioluminescence may still evolve, tiny living lanterns blinking in the darkness. A flicker here, a cold blue glow there, signals, lures, warnings, language made of light in a place where sound travels far and sight is limited. Large marine reptiles, if they have descendants adapted for deeper hunting, might descend in long, measured dives, their bodies engineered to manage pressure and oxygen. They may follow migratory routes like underwater highways, traveling between feeding grounds the way whales do in our world, yet shaped by reptilian ancestry rather than mammalian. And if they grow to enormous sizes, it would not be because the sea wanted giants, but because the sea rewards efficiency. Large bodies lose heat more slowly, travel farther, store more energy, endure longer without food. The ocean has always been a place where size can mean survival. Sometimes in calm weather, the surface becomes a mirror. And beneath that mirror, you might glimpse a shadow passing. So broad, it feels impossible. So slow, it seems like a moving island. It doesn't need to hurry. The sea has been making creatures like this for a long time. It knows what it's doing. What changes most, perhaps, is the balance. In our timeline, after the dinosaurs vanish, marine mammals eventually become a major force. Whales, dolphins, seals, reshaping ocean food webs in powerful ways. But here, mammals don't rise as high in the seas. They may exist along coasts and rivers, small and clever, but the open ocean remains dominated by other designs. The top predators are not warm-blooded mammals with complex social hunting strategies, though social behavior could still evolve in reptiles in its own way. The giants are not whales, but something else, air breathers with scales or smooth hides, moving on ancient blue roads. And so the oceans feel like they never stopped being prehistoric. Not in a museum sense, in a living sense. A sense that the present is simply another page in a book the sea has been writing for hundreds of millions of years. Now follow the water inward. Rivers spill from mountains and snake through continents, turning dry land fertile wherever they go. Floodplains spread out like open hands. Seasonal rains arrive, and the land answers with green. But climates are never stable forever. Over long stretches of time, deserts expand. Grasslands spread. Forests retreat in some regions and return in others. The continents continue their slow drifting, lifting mountain ranges that cast rain shadows and create vast arid interiors. And in those open places, where trees are sparse, where the horizon is wide, where the sky feels enormous, life becomes a story of movement. On the plains, migration becomes an ancient heartbeat. You can imagine the morning light over a sea of grass, wind combing the stalks into ripples that look like water. In the distance, a line of shapes appears. First like dark stones, then like animals, then like a living wall. Herbivorous dinosaurs move in herds that stretch for kilometers, their bodies turning the landscape into a moving weather front. Some are built for speed and distance, long-legged, relatively light for their size, traveling in steady lines with heads held forward and tails balancing their motion. Others are heavier and more armored, moving like slow fortresses, confident in their protection. In some regions, you might see crested species that communicate through low calls or display, their social order maintained by ritual rather than constant fighting. In others, horned animals keep close formations, protecting the young in the center while adults ring the outside. The young learn the routes early. Where to cross rivers when the current is lowest, where to avoid boggy ground, where the grass stays greener in late summer, where the predators like to wait, because predators do wait. They don't sprint endlessly, they conserve. They study the herd's edges the way a reader studies a page. They look for the one that limps, the one that drifts. the one whose attention breaks for a second too long. On the open plains, speed matters, but so does timing. Some predators may hunt with bursts of pursuit, using powerful legs and efficient breathing to close distance quickly before the prey can settle into a steady pace. Others rely on ambush even in open country, using shallow depressions, scattered shrubs, or the low rise of a dune to conceal themselves until the last moment. And in a world with large winged creatures, the plains have another kind of hunter too. Sky scanners that watch for panic ripples through herds, then descend toward confusion. The result is a landscape that is constantly alert, not frantic exactly, just aware. Life here is built around the idea that the horizon is not empty. During the hottest part of the day, the plains can become strangely still. Heat rises in wavering sheets. Insects hum. The grass smells sun-baked. Many animals rest, herds clustering in loose groups, bodies angled to catch wind, eyes half-lidded but always watching. Even predators become less active, retreating to shade where it exists, or digging shallow scrapes into cooler soil. Then evening arrives. The temperature softens, shadows lengthen, the light turns honey-colored, and the world begins to move again. Herds resume their steady migration, dust lifting behind them like incense. Water becomes the center of gravity. Paths converge toward rivers, lakes, and seasonal pools, and those places become crowded theaters of risk and necessity. At a waterhole, the air feels tense in a very old way. Herbivores arrive first, sniffing the wind, scanning the edges. A few drink quickly and move away to make room. Others linger, forcing themselves to be calm because panic wastes energy and draws attention. Smaller creatures gather at the margins, birds, small dinosaurs, mammals, each one looking for dropped scraps, insects, or the chance to drink without being noticed. Predators may appear as if they were always there. A shape that was a rock becomes a head lifting. A shadow that was a shrub becomes a body. Sometimes the attack is sudden, one explosive moment, and then it's over, the herd thundering away, hooves or feet pounding, water splashing, dust rising like smoke. Other times, no attack happens at all. The herd drinks, the predators watch, and the whole scene passes like a held breath released. This rhythm, approach, drink, retreat, repeats for millions of years. And over that time, the animals of drylands become specialized for heat, thirst, and distance. Herbivores might evolve more efficient kidneys, able to conserve water. Some may store fat or water reserves, or time their movements to follow rain. Their skin and coverings, scales or feather-like insulation, may reflect sunlight or reduce heat gain. Their behavior becomes clever, resting at midday, moving at dawn and dusk, using wind direction to monitor threats. In deserts, smaller dinosaurs might become quick, pale-colored runners, living in burrows during the day and hunting insects at night. Some may develop large eyes for twilight. Others may have nasal structures that help reclaim moisture from exhaled air. Even larger species can adapt to deserts, as long as there are seasonal routes and reliable water sources. They become travelers, not residents, arriving after rains, leaving when the land dries. And the land itself bears their history. Migration corridors become literal scars in the earth. Repeated footfalls compress soil into hard paths where plants struggle to grow. These paths guide water runoff, shaping erosion, forming gullies that deepen over centuries. River crossings become churned and muddy, altering banks, creating new channels. The landscape is not a passive stage. It is a record. Sometimes extreme events reshape everything. A drought tightens its grip. Waterholes shrink. Herds concentrate around the last remaining rivers. Predators gather too, drawn by the same necessity. Competition rises. Fights break out more often. The weak fall quickly. The air becomes filled with dust and tension. Then the rains return. Thunderstorms sweep across the plains, and the smell of wet earth rises like a blessing. Dry riverbeds become rushing channels again. Seeds that waited in the soil awaken. Grass erupts in sudden green. Insects hatch in swarms. The world feels reborn, and herds spread outward as if exhaling. In those moments, you can see why migration becomes so powerful in this timeline. Movement is not just tradition, it is the map of survival, written into muscle and instinct. And when the herds move, the whole world moves with them. Scavengers trail behind, cleaning what the predators leave. Smaller animals follow the new growth stimulated by grazing. Birds and winged reptiles circle above, watching, waiting, riding thermals that rise from sun-warmed ground. Even plants respond to the passage of giants, evolving to recover quickly, to spread seeds through dung, to tolerate browsing and trampling. The plains become a living system shaped by ancient agreements. Eat, but don't eat everything. Move, but don't stop too long. Drink, but never forget to watch. And if you imagine lying in the grass at night, under a wide sky full of stars, you might hear the migration in the distance, a low, continuous murmur of movement. Not loud like a storm, not sharp like a fight, just the sound of many bodies traveling, the soft thunder of a world that never stopped being ruled by large life. A world where the oceans still belong to ancient swimmers, and the drylands still belong to slow, patient migrations, each one a gentle reminder, whispered through time, that the Earth's oldest rhythms can continue for far longer than we ever expected. In time, even a dinosaur world meets the cold. The planet tilts through its long cycles. Oceans rearrange their currents. Mountains rise and redirect winds. And slowly, so slowly that no single generation can fully notice it, winter begins to claim more territory. Snow lingers longer on high ground. Frost arrives earlier in the year. The edges of the world, near the poles, become harsher and stranger. And still, life goes there. Because in this timeline, dinosaurs never stop being the great experimenters of land. They don't retreat politely from difficult places. They adapt, and then they spread. They learn the rules of cold, the way they once learned the rules of heat, drought, flood, and fire. To imagine dinosaur life in polar regions, it helps to forget the old picture of reptiles as sluggish, sunbound creatures. That image belongs to a misunderstanding, an old story we told ourselves before we knew how lively and complex many dinosaurs likely were. In this alternate world, their descendants have had millions and millions of years to refine whatever warmth they already possessed. Higher metabolisms, efficient lungs, insulating coverings, behaviors that conserve heat and energy. So the poles are not empty, they are alive, quietly, stubbornly alive. Picture a high-latitude forest in a cooler age. The trees are different from tropical jungles. They are tall and resilient, shaped by wind and snow. Conifers dominate, their needles designed to endure freezing air. Hardy shrubs cluster low to the ground. Ferns appear in sheltered pockets in warmer months. The soil is dark with peat and needles, and in spring, when the thaw begins, the ground releases a scent that feels ancient, damp earth waking after a long sleep. In summer, the light seems endless. The sun stays up for hours and hours, circling the sky without fully setting. The days stretch until time itself feels softened and wide. During that brief, intense season, everything grows fast. Plants rush to bloom and seed. Insects hatch in sudden bursts. Life behaves as if it knows it has limited time and refuses to waste it. And that is when the great polar herds arrive. They come like moving weather, traveling from lower latitudes along routes worn into the land over countless generations. You might see them first as dark shapes at the edge of the tree line, then as bodies, many bodies, flowing between trunks. Some are feathered, thick-coated with dense, downy layers beneath longer outer filaments. Some are scaled, but heavy-bodied, with skin that holds heat and perhaps patches of bristle-like covering along the spine, a compromise between insulation and shedding. They do not look like the dinosaurs of children's books anymore. Not quite. Evolution has had time to make them into something suited for this place. Broader bodies, shorter extremities where heat loss would be expensive, and behaviors tuned to the rhythm of the polar year. The young stay close to adults, not just for protection from predators, but for warmth, for guidance, for the inherited memory of the root. Herd animals in cold climates often become deeply patterned in their movements, because getting lost out here isn't dramatic, it's final. A wrong turn can mean a valley without shelter, a river still frozen, a storm front that arrives early. So the herd moves like something practiced. When they rest, they do it in loose clusters that break the wind. When they graze, they spread out but remain connected. Always within sight, always within hearing. Calls travel far in cold air. Low, resonant sounds can roll through the forest like distant drums, keeping the group together even when fog or snowfall thickens visibility. And yes, there are predators here too. Some are feathered hunters built for endurance rather than explosive chase. Cold regions reward patience. They reward the ability to walk long distances without burning too much energy, to keep moving while others tire, to wait while others panic. Imagine a predator standing still in falling snow. Its feathers catch flakes like soft ash. Its eyes remain open, calm, and unblinking. It is not in a hurry. It doesn't need to be. In these environments, the land itself does part of the hunting. A weakened animal can't hide easily. Deep snow slows the sick and the young. Cold nights punish injuries. Scarcity makes every mistake cost more. But the prey here is not helpless. Herds defend each other. They learn the shapes of danger. Some species may develop thick feather ruffs or bony facial structures used in warning displays, ways to say, "I see you," without wasting energy in a chase. Others keep to open spaces where sightlines are long. In a cold forest, being surprised can be deadly, so awareness becomes a kind of shield. As summer fades, the world begins to change again. The endless daylight shrinks, the sun dips lower. Frost returns to the mornings. The insects disappear. Leaves and needles harden. The air becomes sharper, cleaner, more brittle, and the great herds begin to drift southward, following a pull older than memory. Migration, in this dinosaur world, becomes one of the planet's grandest rituals, especially in colder eras. It isn't just movement, it's a strategy that shapes bodies and minds across millions of years. Animals that migrate long distances often evolve strong orientation abilities. They sense subtle cues, the angle of sunlight, the pattern of stars, the smell of certain winds, the feel of humidity changing. In this timeline, some dinosaur lineages might become extraordinary navigators, carrying an internal map that is partly instinct and partly learned tradition. The young follow adults not simply because the adults are strong, but because the adults remember. And memory here is survival. Yet not all creatures migrate. Some stay. The residents of the polar regions are the ones evolution has sculpted into cold specialists. They might be smaller-bodied omnivores that live in forest shelters, feeding on anything available: seeds, bark, fungi, insects when they appear, carrion when the chance arises. Their feathers or coverings grow thicker as the year cools, and in autumn they become quieter, more conservative with movement. Some might store food, others might rely on fat reserves. Some might enter states of torpor, periods of slowed metabolism and activity during the harshest weeks, sleeping in protected hollows, under roots, in shallow caves, in dens dug into insulated soil. Not true hibernation as we know it in some mammals, perhaps, but something like it. A turning down of the internal flame to survive the tight months. And then comes the long night. The polar winter doesn't merely bring cold, it changes the sky. Days shorten until daylight becomes a pale, brief glow near the horizon, and then even that fades. Darkness settles in, not like a curtain, but like a season. The stars sharpen. The moon's presence feels larger. Snow reflects faint light, turning the world into a dim, silvery landscape where shapes are softened and sound travels far. In that darkness, the forest becomes a different kind of place. Quieter, but never empty. You might hear distant calls, low and mournful or short and sharp, communication between survivors, contact signals, warnings. You might see tracks crossing a snowfield, showing where a small forager moved from one shelter to another. You might glimpse the shadow of a predator passing along the edge of trees, its body low, careful, conserving warmth. And sometimes, above it all, the aurora appears. Green curtains unfolding across black sky, rippling in slow waves. The light is silent, and it makes even a world of predators and hunger feel strangely peaceful, like the planet is dreaming in colors. In this timeline, dinosaurs do not merely tolerate the cold, they help define it. Their presence changes plant communities, shapes migrations, influences where forests survive and where tundra expands. Even the ice ages themselves might unfold differently, because ecosystem structures affect carbon cycles and vegetation patterns. But in a documentary for Sleep Sense, the most important detail is simpler. The cold places are not dead places, they are living places, filled with breath and patience and the steady work of adaptation. And from these harsh landscapes, evolution sometimes produces something else besides thicker feathers and stronger legs. It produces minds that pay attention. Because cold environments reward planning, they reward remembering, they reward cooperation and timing, they reward learning. And that is one of the reasons the next question begins to feel less like fantasy and more like a quiet possibility. If dinosaurs continue for tens of millions of years beyond our timeline, could something among them become profoundly intelligent? Not human, never exactly human, but intelligent in a way that is unmistakable. To approach this gently, it helps to first notice a truth about intelligence. It doesn't appear because nature wants it. It appears when it is useful and when the costs don't outweigh the benefits. A bigger brain is expensive. It consumes energy. It demands more food. It can slow growth and require longer parental care. So, evolution only invests in advanced cognition when it pays back. When problem solving leads to more survival and more offspring. In our world, many animals show pieces of this payback. Corvids solving puzzles, parrots learning complex sounds, dolphins coordinating hunts, primates using tools, elephants remembering water sources across seasons. None of these creatures needed to build cities to become clever. They became clever because their lives rewarded flexibility. So in a dinosaur world, the question isn't, could dinosaurs be intelligent? Some already were, at least as intelligent as many modern animals, based on what we infer from their relatives and anatomy. The deeper question is, could dinosaur intelligence continue to climb, slowly, steadily, until it becomes a dominant trait in a lineage? And the answer, in this imagined world, is that it could, under the right pressures. The most likely candidates wouldn't be the giants, whose lives revolve around bulk and grazing routes. They would be smaller-bodied creatures with active lifestyles, predators or omnivores, animals that face changing opportunities and risks each day. They would benefit from curiosity, from social learning, from communication, from memory. Imagine a lineage of small bird-like theropods, already feathered, already agile, already quick. They hunt insects, small animals, and scavenge when they can. They live near riverbanks where food changes with seasons. Fish runs, shell beds, flooded meadows, fallen fruit, insect swarms. In such a habitat, rigid instincts can help you survive, but flexible thinking helps you thrive. A creature that learns the timing of fish migrations eats better than one that simply wanders. A creature that remembers where shells are abundant can return at low tide. A creature that understands how to flush insects from tall grass by stirring it with a stick, or by cooperating with a companion, gains more calories with less risk. And if the environment is competitive, the advantage of learning becomes even clearer. Now imagine these dinosaurs living in groups, not massive herds, but tight social clusters, family units, cooperative bands, colonies that share nesting areas. Social living creates its own pressure for intelligence because it introduces relationships, reputation, hierarchy, trust, deception, and coordination. In a social world, it matters who you are. It matters who remembers you. It matters whether you can predict another individual's behavior. These are the subtle engines that can push cognition upward. Communication becomes richer. At first, it's basic: alarm calls, contact calls, mating calls. But over time, signals can become more nuanced. Different calls for different predators, calls that convey location, calls that coordinate movement, displays of feathers, posture, and gestures that carry meaning beyond simple intimidation. And once signals become complex, learning them becomes valuable. Young individuals pay attention, copying adults. Traditions can form, behavioral cultures in small ways, preferred nesting sites, favorite foraging strategies, habitual routes. You can almost picture it: a dawn seen by a river, mist lifting, a group of clever-clawed dinosaurs moving with deliberate quiet. One approaches a log, tilts its head, taps the wood, listens for hollowness, then uses a thin stick to pry out insects. Another watches and imitates, awkward at first, then better with practice. Tool use doesn't require hands like ours. It requires control, patience, and learning. Birds today use tools with beaks and feet, so it's not difficult to imagine a dinosaur lineage doing the same with claws, jaws, and clever manipulation. And the moment tool use becomes reliable, it opens doors. Not doors to technology overnight, nothing sudden, nothing cinematic, but doors to survival strategies that accumulate. A tool lets you access food others can't reach. That means more energy. More energy can support bigger brains. Bigger brains support better tools. And the loop strengthens slowly across thousands and thousands of generations. But intelligence doesn't grow in a vacuum. It grows in a world that challenges it. In this dinosaur Earth, those challenges are everywhere. Shifting climates, crowded ecosystems, powerful predators, and constant competition. A smart lineage might evolve not to dominate everything, but to navigate complexity, like a skilled traveler in an unpredictable landscape. They might become excellent at reading signs, wind changes, scent trails, distant calls. They might learn to use terrain strategically, staying near cover, choosing safe water crossings, nesting in places that minimize ambush risk. They might also become deeply curious, because curiosity is how you discover new resources before others do. Curiosity, in nature, is a gamble. It can get you killed. So a lineage that balances curiosity with caution is the one that prospers. Approach the unknown, but not recklessly. Learn, but stay aware. Explore, but return to safety. If a dinosaur lineage reaches a certain threshold of cognition, you might see behaviors that feel almost familiar. Play, for one. Play is often a sign of intelligence, because it's practice without immediate survival reward. Young individuals might chase each other, wrestle, steal objects, hide them, retrieve them, test each other's boundaries. Through play, They learn coordination, strength, social rules, and problem solving. You might see teaching, not formal teaching, but guiding behavior. Adults tolerating the mistakes of juveniles, allowing them to handle tools or food items, intervening when danger approaches. You might see cooperative hunting in some forms. Cooperation not as a rigid pack structure, but as flexible teamwork. One individual flushing prey, another waiting, another cutting off escape routes. You might see problem solving around obstacles, using water to float food from a crevice, dropping hard-shelled prey onto stones, using debris to bridge small gaps, choosing the best approach to a guarded nesting site. And if the lineage is long-lived with strong parental care, the opportunity for learning expands even more. Longer childhoods mean more time to observe and practice, more time to build a mental library of the world. In the cold regions especially, intelligence might be rewarded by planning, knowing when to move, where to shelter, how to share warmth, how to find food under snow, how to survive storms without wasting energy. A smart dinosaur might not need to invent much. It might simply survive better by understanding patterns. And then there is the quiet question of self-awareness, the sense of being an individual mind. It's hard to measure even in modern animals, and in this imagined world, it would remain uncertain. But we can gently consider the possibility that given enough time, a dinosaur lineage could evolve a more reflective kind of intelligence. Recognition of individuals, complex social bonds, grief-like behaviors, curiosity about objects, perhaps even simple planning for future events beyond instinctive migration. Not human, not mythic, just awake. And if such creatures exist alongside enormous herbivores and terrifying predators, their intelligence would not necessarily make them rulers. It would make them survivors, innovators, navigators of a world that never becomes safe. In a sense, that might be the most realistic outcome. A highly intelligent dinosaur lineage could emerge and still remain hidden in the margins, living in dense forests, coastal labyrinths, river valleys, or island chains where competition is manageable. They might not spread everywhere. They might not build anything grand. They might simply become the clever ones who endure, like a quiet flame sheltered from wind. And if you imagine encountering them, not face to face, but at a distance, you might see something subtle that makes you pause. A group that doesn't scatter immediately, but watches. A head tilt that feels like evaluation. A coordinated movement that suggests shared intention. A call exchange between two individuals that sounds less like noise and more like meaning. In that moment, the world would feel different. Not because the dinosaurs are monsters, or because the Earth is savage, but because intelligence, true, flexible, learning intelligence, has risen along a path we never took. And as night settles over this imagined planet, as polar skies glow faintly with aurora and distant migrations murmur across frozen forests, you can let that possibility rest gently in your mind. That the story of intelligence is not a single staircase that leads only to us. It is a landscape, and in another timeline, on another Earth that kept its giants, minds could bloom in forms as ancient as feathers, as patient as winter, and as quiet as sleep. Now let the imagination drift toward the most delicate part of this alternate Earth, the part that touches us. Because once you picture dinosaurs continuing, once you picture forests still ruled by giants, plains still trembling with migration, coastlines still shadowed by ancient wings, another question arrives, quietly, like a thought you didn't invite but can't ignore. Where do humans fit in a world that never makes room for them? In our timeline, the story of humans is not a story of being the strongest animal. It's a story of timing, opportunity, and a strange kind of cleverness that becomes unstoppable once the world opens up. We emerge in landscapes where large mammals dominate, creatures we can eventually hunt, compete with, domesticate, and replace. We become the species that spreads into open daylight, because open daylight becomes possible to claim. But in a dinosaur world, open daylight is already claimed, not by one creature, but by entire empires of life, herds that move like rivers, predators that specialize for every terrain, aerial hunters that keep the sky attentive, and ecosystems that have been tuned for millions of years around those presences. The gaps that mammals filled after the dinosaurs vanished are not gaps anymore. They never exist. So if a primate lineage appears here, it appears in a tighter world. It appears under pressure. It appears with fewer safe experiments. Imagine early primate-like mammals in dense forests that are older and more complex than ours. Forests where the canopy is not a refuge, but a contested realm. Fruit exists, yes. Leaves and insects and nests and bark and sap exist. But so do climbing predators with feathers and claws, and small fast dinosaurs that move through branches like living knives. The cost of being careless is high. The cost of being loud is higher. So the primates that endure are the ones that become quieter than ours. More still, more sensitive. They develop careful hands, yes. Hands are useful for climbing and grasping, but their movements become efficient and restrained, designed to disturb as little as possible. They learn to pause and listen. They learn to read the subtle tension in birdsong and the sudden silence that means something has arrived. Their social lives might still grow rich because social living is useful in dangerous environments, but their communication becomes soft and coded. Small facial cues, gentle vocalizations, quick touches. The forest trains them to be discreet. If tool use arises, it arises as a whisper, not as a loud revolution, but as small advantages, using stones to crack nuts, using sticks to probe for insects, using leaves to carry water or shield against biting insects. Tool use is beneficial, but it also takes time, and time spent focused on an object can be time spent not watching for danger. So the smartest individuals learn to balance it. Work quickly, keep eyes up, stay near cover. Now imagine those primates reaching the forest edges. In our world, the forest edges open onto grasslands that become highways for human expansion. But here, those grasslands may be dominated by dinosaurs whose presence makes the open world feel owned. To step into the open is to step into a place where you can be seen from far away, where you cannot vanish into branches, where your small body is surrounded by the ancient machinery of migration and predation. So the primates hesitate. They may become edge dwellers, living where forest meets river, where water provides fish and shellfish and reeds, where trees provide shelter, and where open ground can be crossed in short, careful bursts. They learn the timing of herds, the rhythms of predators, the safe moments to forage. Their brains grow not because they are conquering, but because they are navigating complexity. If something like early humans appears, bipedal, capable of longer travel, with hands free to carry and craft, it may appear in places where dinosaurs are less overwhelming. Islands, peninsulas, highlands, coastal labyrinths of mangroves and tidal flats, places where geography itself offers protection. In these regions, early humans might develop as shoreline people, becoming extremely skilled at the edge of water, fishing, gathering shellfish, harvesting seaweed, trapping small animals, collecting bird eggs when possible, foraging for tubers and fruit. They might learn to read tides the way others read seasons. They might develop quiet boats early, simple rafts, dugouts, light craft that allow them to move without marching across open land. Water becomes their ally, not because it is safe, but because it is predictable in a way the dinosaur-dominated land is not. Fire, too, could still enter the story, because lightning and wildfires exist in every timeline. But fire is harder to keep when the world around you is crowded with large life. Smoke can signal your location. Bright flames can attract attention. A fire can also anger territorial animals and disrupt the hiding strategies that keep you alive. So humans in this world might treat fire differently. Smaller, more hidden, used carefully, sheltered behind rocks or in caves, kept low and smokeless when possible. The first great human technologies might not be the loud ones. They might be the quiet ones. Better shelter, better camouflage, better traps, better ways to store food without scents that draw scavengers. And if language develops, and it likely still would, because language is extraordinarily useful for social navigation, then language grows in a world where silence matters, where warning must be quick and clear, where meaning must travel through darkness without shouting. A culture of listening becomes as important as a culture of speaking. Now imagine humans trying to expand inland. In our timeline, expansion becomes inevitable once agriculture appears. But agriculture depends on stability. You plant, you guard, you harvest. It works best when large animals can be fenced or driven away, when predators can be reduced, when your crops are not simply invitations to every hungry creature for kilometers. In a dinosaur world, a field of crops would be like lighting a lantern in the wilderness. It would draw attention, and attention is expensive. So agriculture, if it appears, may appear differently. Small garden plots hidden near sheltered settlements, crops mixed into forest edges rather than planted in wide open fields, food plants integrated with natural vegetation in a way that avoids creating obvious targets. Humans might become masters of invisible farming, tending edible plants in scattered patches, using the landscape as camouflage. Large domesticated animals, like cattle and horses in our timeline, may never become part of the human story because the land's large herbivores are not easily tamed, and the risk of keeping large animals near settlements is enormous. Domestication might focus on smaller creatures, birds, small mammals, perhaps insects, perhaps fish in managed ponds, quiet sources of protein that don't require open grazing. Settlements might remain small, tucked into defensible locations, cliffs, rocky outcrops, dense wetlands, high islands, steep valleys. Architecture would reflect fear, not in a dramatic way, but in a practical way. Thick walls, hidden entrances, watch points, the habit of building with escape routes in mind. Paths would be narrow and covered. Travel would be cautious and timed. Night might be the safest time to move, unless the local predators prefer night, in which case dusk and dawn become the safest windows. Humans in this world could still be intelligent, creative, emotional, spiritual, but they may never become numerous. They may remain patchwork, a species of small pockets. And that changes everything about what human civilization becomes. Instead of vast empires, you might have chains of coastal villages that trade by water and rarely go far inland. Instead of roads that cut across continents, you might have hidden trails through forest corridors, known only to locals and used only when necessary. Instead of sprawling farmland, you might have careful mosaics of managed ecosystems that look like wilderness to any passing eye. Technology might still advance, but along different priorities. Not speed, stealth, not expansion, resilience, not domination, avoidance and adaptation. Metalworking might exist, but mines and forges are noisy. They change landscapes, they create smells, so perhaps metal is rare and precious, used sparingly. Stone, bone, and wood might remain dominant materials for much longer. If complex tools exist, they might be portable and concealable. If writing exists, it might be carved on small tablets or kept on durable objects that can be carried quickly if a settlement must relocate. Because relocation might be common, not constant fleeing, just a way of life in a world where migration routes shift and predators move and climates swing. And in such a world, humans might develop a deep respect for the ancient animals, not a romantic respect, but a practical one that turns into myth, ritual, and story. Children would grow up learning the calls of distant herds the way children in our world learn weather patterns. They would learn which valleys are crossed in spring, which rivers become dangerous in late summer, which cliff faces are nesting sites for winged hunters. Human spirituality might be shaped by that presence, by the feeling that the world is not built around us, by the feeling that we are guests. And in quiet moments, standing in fog near a river, hearing low calls roll through distant trees, humans might experience awe in a way that feels almost unavoidable. Not because dinosaurs are magical, but because the world would constantly remind you that life is larger than your plans. Now, let that thought drift forward into something like modern day in this alternate timeline. Picture an Earth that has reached an age comparable to ours. Mountain ranges familiar, continents in familiar positions, climates in familiar patterns. Yet the living face of the planet is profoundly different. Not because dinosaurs are everywhere in the same way, but because they remain a dominant force in most ecosystems, shaping how land is used, how forests grow, how plains pulse with movement. The world feels less domesticated. Even if humans exist, their footprint is lighter. Cities, if any, are rare and small, clustered in the safest places. Islands with natural barriers, high plateaus with limited access, coastlines with cliffs, and deep water that deter large land animals. Where humans build, they build with caution, and where they don't build, the land remains unbroken. There might be no endless grids of farmland, no continents stitched together by highways, no bright veil of nightlights seen from orbit. Instead, you would see darkness. And in that darkness, the planet would feel alive in a way our modern world often forgets how to be. Imagine standing on a shoreline in this modern dinosaur Earth. The beach is not a tourist place. It is a living frontier. Tracks crisscross the sand, three-toed prints, claw marks, the drag of tails, the scrapes of nesting pits. Farther down the coast, a cluster of large bodies rests near the surf, basking, recovering heat, waiting for the tide to shift. Overhead, silhouettes circle slowly, riding coastal winds. A human settlement nearby, if there is one, would be quiet, set back from the open sand, hidden among rocks or trees. Smoke from cooking fires would be minimized. Food would be stored carefully. Watchers would keep an eye on the sky as much as the land. Now imagine moving inland. Forests are deeper, more continuous, less fragmented. They are shaped by browsing and trampling and seasonal movement. Clearings appear where herds pass, then vanish again as plants reclaim them. Trees carry scars where horns or bodies rubbed against bark. Riverbanks are churned at crossing points. Certain valleys are known as corridors, ancient routes that herds follow like tradition carved into instinct. On the plains, migration remains one of the planet's grand spectacles. In our world, many great migrations have been reduced or broken by fences, roads, and development. In this world, those migrations might still be immense, not necessarily larger than anything imaginable, but more continuous, more uninterrupted. The land belongs to moving animals in a way that feels timeless. Where herds move, predators move too, and scavengers, and small opportunists. The whole food web becomes a traveling community, like a moving city of life. And above it all, the skies are fuller. Not only birds, but other large flyers too, depending on how this timeline shaped them. In some regions, long-winged gliders might cross between coastal cliffs and inland thermals, watching for movement, searching for fish runs, or nesting colonies, or the chaos of a hunt. The presence of large flyers changes how everything behaves. It changes when small animals move. It changes where nests are placed. It changes how open a creature can afford to be. The feel of the world is that visibility is never neutral. To be seen is to be part of someone else's calculation. So life becomes skilled at disappearing. Now consider the most striking difference of all, how the human mind might experience this world. In our timeline, we grow up with the idea that nature is a place we visit, a park, a holiday, a documentary, something separate. In this world, nature is not separate. It is the main structure, and humans, if they exist, are woven into it carefully, like a thread that survives by not pulling too hard. Human culture would likely develop a strong ethic of restraint, not as a moral lecture, but as a practical inheritance. Children would be taught not to waste, not to draw attention, not to take more than can be replaced. Communities might have traditions that regulate hunting and foraging, because overuse would quickly collapse the delicate safety of their niche. They might see themselves as living between larger powers, between migrations, between predators, between seasons. And because the world is less controlled, the night sky becomes a constant companion. Without widespread artificial light, stars would be vivid over most landscapes. The Milky Way would be bright enough to cast a faint, ghostly glow. Night would feel like a real environment, not just an absence of day. Nocturnal dinosaurs and mammals and insects would make it a living soundscape. Distant calls, rustling in undergrowth, the occasional sudden wing beat overhead. In such a world, stories would matter, not only as entertainment, but as survival. Stories would carry knowledge, where the dangerous cliffs are, when the river floods, which call means move now, which valley is cursed not by spirits, but by predators that always return. Myth would be a map, and maps would be sacred. Now imagine for a moment that a non-human intelligence has also emerged by this time. Some lineage of clever social dinosaurs with advanced learning and tool-like behavior. Not building machines, not wearing clothing, not anything human-shaped, but intelligent enough to recognize patterns, to remember individuals, to communicate meaningfully, to adapt quickly. In such a modern world, the planet would contain more than one kind of mind. Humans might share certain coastlines or river systems with intelligent dinosaur groups, each aware of the other in cautious ways. Encounters would be rare, because both would learn to avoid unnecessary risk. But the knowledge would exist, like a quiet truth. We are not the only ones who watch, not the only ones who plan, not the only ones who learn. And that thought changes the emotional atmosphere of the planet. It makes the world feel inhabited, not just by bodies, but by intentions. Yet even with that, the Earth remains balanced in its own way, not peaceful exactly, but steady, because ecosystems that remain intact for long periods develop a kind of ancient resilience. Predators keep herds healthy. Herbivores keep vegetation dynamic. Disturbance makes room for renewal. Migration spreads nutrients and seeds. Life, given time, learns how to hold itself together. So what does the world look like in the end? It looks wilder, not in a chaotic way, but in a layered way. A world where coastlines are nurseries and battlegrounds, where forests are living cathedrals shaped by giant bodies, where plains are crossed by moving walls of life, where polar regions are not empty but quietly inhabited, where the sky is busy and the night is dark and the stars are bright, and humans, if present, are different too. Less like rulers, more like careful witnesses, people who build small, enduring lives in the safe folds of the landscape, people who plan around migrations, who respect nesting seasons, who treat the open plains as something to cross only with humility. People who carry knowledge the way you carry water, thoughtfully, never spilling more than you must. In our world, we often talk about wilderness as if it is a leftover, something that remains after everything else has been taken. In this dinosaur Earth, wilderness is not a leftover. It is the default condition. Vast regions remain governed by the old agreements between predator and prey, between migration and regrowth, between nesting season and scarcity. The land is not quiet because no one is there. It is quiet because so many are there, moving with purpose, listening, watching, adjusting. If you could look down from high above, higher than any bird or pterosaur, what you would notice first is how the world is not broken into so many straight lines. There are no endless grids, no long fences cutting migrations into fragments, no bright veins of highways running across continents. River systems are allowed to wander. Forests connect across distances that, in our world, would be chopped into patches. Coastlines are stitched with wetlands and mangrove forests where great life thrives. The planet looks softer, less scarred, but it is not gentle. It is simply whole. The great dinosaur-dominated biomes would have their own distinct faces, almost like different planets sharing the same globe. In the tropics, the forests would look dense and layered, with enormous canopy trees and thick undergrowth shaped by constant browsing. You might see long-necked herbivores moving like slow cranes above the ferns, their heads rising and dipping as they feed. You might see smaller feathered dinosaurs darting through sunlit clearings, flashing colors that vanish again into shadow. Rivers would be busy corridors, places where herds come to drink, where predators wait, where pterosaurs patrol overhead in steady loops. In the temperate zones, the landscape might feel more seasonal, more dramatic. Spring would bring sudden explosions of plant growth and nesting activity. Summer would be loud with calls and movement. Autumn would be heavy with migration, animals flowing southward, as if the land itself is pouring. Winter would quiet the world, but not silence it. Tracks would carve across snow. Breath would fog the air. Feathered bodies would endure storms with stubborn patience. On the plains and steppes, the open horizons would still belong to movement. Herds would cross like weather fronts, raising dust and reshaping grass patterns with their passage. The land would be marked by ancient routes, compressed paths, worn river crossings, certain valleys that always fill with life at certain times of year. Predators would shadow the edges, not always attacking, often simply tracking, part of the rhythm, part of the system. In deserts, life would cling to the timing of rain and the secrecy of shade. Smaller dinosaurs and mammals would slip between burrows and rocks. Larger animals might pass through only seasonally, following the green pulses after storms. At night, the desert would feel alive with subtle motion. Insect hums, small footprints in sand, distant calls carrying cleanly through cool air. And in the far north and south, where we might expect emptiness, there would be a quiet resilience. Cold-adapted dinosaurs would move through snow-laced forests and tundra edges, their feathers thick, their behavior deliberate. The aurora would sometimes ripple overhead, painting the sky while the land below continues its ancient routines. Feed, conserve, migrate, endure. Across all these places, the oceans would remain the planet's vast, breathing underworld, filled with ancient swimmers and shoreline nesters and deep-water mysteries. From orbit, the seas would look familiar. But if you drifted over them at low altitude, you might see different patterns. Clusters of large bodies surfacing together in coastal bays, different kinds of predator activity near reefs, nesting seasons so intense that some beaches become dangerous to approach for months at a time. Now, what about human life within all this? If humans exist here in any significant way, they live as a species that has learned a particular kind of humility, not as a virtue-signaling idea, but as a practical necessity. Their settlements are shaped by defensibility and discretion. Their economies, whether simple or complex, are shaped by the reality that the land cannot be fully controlled. The presence of massive migratory herbivores and powerful predators means that humans must either avoid conflict or pay a heavy price for it. So human society in this world might become more maritime than continental. Coastal life would be central. Fishing, sailing, navigating archipelagos, and sheltered bays where large land dinosaurs rarely venture. Rivers would be the other lifelines, natural highways that allow travel without crossing open plains. People would move by water because water can be watched, planned around, and escaped into. Water offers routes that don't require you to step into the migratory highways of giants. You might imagine a chain of island cultures, each one small but sophisticated in its own way, trading by boat under starry skies. You might imagine inland communities tucked into limestone cave systems and cliffside terraces, where a single narrow approach can be guarded and where sudden retreats are possible. You might imagine swamp settlements built on stilts, hidden in reeds, protected by the very wetlands that discourage large animals. And because the world is less fragmented, humans might not spread into every niche the way we did. They might remain concentrated in safe geographies, leaving enormous territories largely untouched. Not because humans are morally purer, but because the cost of expansion is too high when the dominant animals of the land are not easily displaced. If there are cities in this world, they are likely not sprawling megacities. They are fortified hubs, dense, compact, carefully located. Their architecture would be shaped by deterrence, thick walls, limited gates, elevated watch platforms, controlled access to water. They would build with stone where possible, because stone resists fire and claws and weather. Streets might be narrow and covered, reducing visibility from above. Food storage would be engineered to resist scavengers. Sealed vaults, subterranean granaries, hidden smokehouses. Even the soundscape of human life would be different. Less of the constant roar of engines and industry. More quiet craft, more nighttime movement, more dependence on listening and reading the environment. Human music, if it develops richly, might favor softer instruments, rhythms that carry within walls, songs meant to be heard by those close rather than broadcast into the wild. And education would likely be deeply ecological. Children would learn not only names of plants and animals, but the patterns. When the valley becomes dangerous, when the river is safest to cross, when nesting season turns cliffs into no-go zones, when the herd routes shift after drought. Knowledge would be inherited like a treasure. Mistakes would not be cute. Mistakes would be expensive. Because in this world, nature does not feel like a separate category. It is the surrounding intelligence. It is the constant negotiation. Now imagine the modern technology level in this world, if it exists at all. Would humans build machines? Possibly. Humans innovate wherever they can survive long enough to do it. But the paths of innovation would be shaped by constraints. Mining is dangerous if it disrupts territory. Large-scale agriculture is difficult if it attracts mega-herbivores. Long road networks are impractical if migration corridors regularly pass through and predators patrol wide areas. So technology might develop in more compact, localized ways, more like islands of advancement rather than a single global web. Sailing could become extremely advanced. Navigation and astronomy might become central sciences because water travel is safer than land travel. Material science might focus on durability and concealment rather than mass production. Power sources might be small scale, hydro in defensible valleys, wind on protected cliffs, controlled fires in stone chambers, perhaps even geothermal where available. And if humans ever develop something like flight, it would be approached with caution. The sky is not empty. Large flyers exist. A small human craft would be vulnerable. Flight might remain rare, used for scouting and travel between safe zones, not for casual commuting. Which brings us to a strange emotional image. A modern human in this world might still look up and feel small, not because the cosmos is large, but because the air itself is inhabited by predators and travelers. The sky would not be neutral, it would be a place of watchfulness. Now let the imagination drift one last time to the far edge of possibility. If intelligent, highly social dinosaur lineages exist in this modern world, the planet becomes not only wilder, but more psychologically complex. Because now there are multiple kinds of aware beings sharing the Earth. Not necessarily communicating, not necessarily cooperating, not necessarily fighting, just existing, learning and adapting. Human myths might include them the way our myths include spirits and giants, except here, the giants are real, and sometimes they look back. Encounters would be rare because the smartest strategy in a dangerous world is often avoidance. But in certain places, river mouths, coastal cliffs, seasonal feeding grounds, overlaps could happen. Humans might notice tool-like behaviors. Stones used to crack shells, sticks used to probe for insects, coordinated group movements that suggest planning. Intelligent dinosaurs might notice humans as a peculiar animal. Upright, small, bright-eyed, carrying objects, moving in patterns that imply intention. And this awareness, even without direct contact, would shape human culture. It would keep humility alive. It would keep the idea of dominion from taking root. In our world, humans often live as if we are alone in our kind of mind. Here, we might sense that mind is not ours alone. And that changes how you treat the land, how you treat life, how you treat your own place in the story. So the final image of this dinosaur Earth is not a world of constant chaos. It is a world of constant relationship. A world where ecosystems remain intact enough to regulate themselves, where predators keep balance, where migrations keep land fertile, where forests remain thick and continuous, where oceans remain ancient, where polar regions remain inhabited, where night remains dark and full of stars. And in that world, if you were to stand quietly at dawn, perhaps on a cliff overlooking a misty valley, you might see a distant herd moving like slow shadow through fog. You might hear a low call roll across the land, deep enough to feel in your chest more than your ears. You might watch silhouettes wheel in the sky, riding invisible currents, and for a moment everything would feel very simple. Not safe exactly, but ordered. The Earth doing what it has always done best, making life, shaping it, testing it, and letting it endure. And as that thought settles, soft and heavy, you can let the world fade gently again into the dark, into the quiet space where imagined forests breathe, oceans swell, distant migrations murmur, and sleep, like a slow tide, comes in.